Welcome to Enchanted Lore. In today's video, we're going to talk about different ways on how to keep your game flowing. As a GM, we all need to make quick decisions from time to time, and this is to help keep the game moving along. And here are some tips on how you can handle this smoothly. Point number one, prioritize speed over perfection. As a GM, there will be time when you are unsure of an exact ruling. We've all been there, whether it is as a newer GM, where you haven't learned and mastered all the rules, or as a seasoned GM, where there might be some obscure or complex rule that you just don't exactly recall. Let's take a look at an example. A player wants to go and grapple a flying creature. You don't quite remember the grapple rules, and so you have to make a decision. We've all been there, where we've come across some set of rules that are just complex or you just don't remember. Unfortunately, as much as I love Pathfinder First Edition, their grapple rules are kind of complex, in which you need to follow a flowchart to determine what is the state of the grapple. So instead of flipping through a rule book to try to find the rules and see, okay, how do we handle this situation, make a decision. I follow a principle that if I cannot find the answer to my question for a rule within 15 to 30 seconds, I just make an executive decision, your GM prerogative, your GM decision, and move on. So for the example with the grapple check of the flying creature, you can simply say, hey, go ahead and attempt an athletics check, and if you succeed, you both are on the ground. This would be a quick, simple solution to that, right? Another kind of example is where maybe it is raining and the player's character wants to run and jump on the back of a moving wagon and make an attack. Okay, so now you have kind of a complex situation. You have where they're taking a movement. Okay, that's allowed. They're taking an attack action. They can do that. Oh, but now we have the environmental and stuff like that. So you can add a certain level of complexities and stuff like that. But if you are newer or unsure, you can simply add in certain checks to that. Be like, okay, instead of me looking at, okay, what are the weather rules? What is a moving target rules? Make a decision. Simplify it down to the core elements. And so you could just be like, hey, go ahead and make this acrobatics check. And if you succeed, boom, you're on the wagon. You can make your attack. If you fail, you're going to be hanging on for your dear life. And then you just keep the game rolling along. Okay, point number two, keep the game moving, and then you can check on things later. For example, if a player kind of argues about a certain rule or a certain mechanic in the middle of combat, instead of slowing down the game to a halt to then verify and do all the rule checks, especially for its weird things, just say, hey, I hear you. Let's just do it like this for now, and then I will double check this, and then we can correct it for future sessions and stuff like that. This is okay to do. Mistakes will be made. There are things that you need to do, and it's better to do this. Once again, I want to pause here for just a second and say this is not an excuse for you not to read and gain an understanding of the rules, because you as a GM should do that. That is still your obligation and duty. But there are many different rules, especially if maybe you switch between systems and what have you. We're all here to have a fun time, and let's keep it going. Another point would be a situation where you say yes, but, or no, but, And in that sort of situation is where you might have a player present to you maybe a unique use case on how they want to use a spell or some feat or something like that in kind of a different way that it kind of falls in the rule. It's in a gray area, right? But you're just not sure you want to allow that to happen yet because it is a long-term effect sort of thing, right? So an example is where a witch in one of our games, the character wanted to kind of use the spell to kind of hover off the ground on this little cloud, that way she didn't have to soil her feet, with the dirt. So the GM thought about it, did his research, and allowed that to be an ongoing spell. So the point of this being is that it's okay to give an answer to say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't do, or let me get back to you, right? Because let me see if this is going to break the game in some way, or maybe I will allow you to do that, but we'll put some additional restrictions. Okay, now for point number 4. Let the players roll if unsure. If a player wants to do something that's, let's say once again with the complexity and stuff like that, that is another tool that you have is just going back and letting them roll and just seeing what the outcome is. So, for example, a player might say, hey, I want to use Mage Hand to reach into this person who's in this caravan and steal from them and something of the sorts, right? And you're like, well, man, that's kind of complex. Roll for it. Let's see how this happens. And just in your mind, raise up apply an appropriate target number or DC that you would think would be appropriate for this challenge, right? So you're like, okay, you're casting the spell, you're doing this. Okay, let's roll for it. And depending on how your roll is and versus their perception, we'll see what's the outcome. Do you get busted or not? So, just kind of, if you're unsure of what the rule is, roll for it. Put a target number and let's just see what happens, right? And then another simple tool, another point that we have is when in doubt, use the advantage or disadvantage situation. If you're just unsure of the exact rulings on how it should be, if they should have like a +2 to their AC in this situation, or maybe they get this sort of bonus or whatever, follow in the footsteps of D&D 5e and just simplify and say, sure, in this situation, I like your RP. I like how you're doing this sort of thing. It makes sense. In this scenario, you have an advantage, right? Or, you know what? I see what you're doing. Don't know instead of me calculating the target number and stuff, I'm just going to penalize you because you're asking for the moon here. You're going to have a disadvantage. So these are things that can kind of help you to just make quick decisions to keep the game moving along. So anyway, next week we're going to discuss specific pacing problems and solutions. So fellow GMs, leave your comments down below for any tips or tricks that you might have used in your games for these sort of situations to keep the game rolling along. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.